Welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto with Full Curl Precision again. So if you're following me or you're new to the channel, um, just a quick little history. Basically, in a nutshell, not only do I try to do ballistic comparisons, realistic gear review of what I have, I try to also discuss the practical side of things, but I'm also a cartridge developer. That's what I'm working on. And so at this point in time, just to clarify for anybody who's like, well, you're just wildcatting. Yeah, duh. That's a reality. Everybody's a wildcat at this point. There hasn't been an original design on a cartridge for like 80 years. Let's face it. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody who's an engineer, but there hasn't been too many originals. Um, Everything is basically based upon the idea of something else. And so at this point in time, they're all Wildcats. The Ruger Compact Magnums were basically the idea of a Wildcat. Uh, the PRCs are all based upon the 375 Ruger. The Creedmoor is off the 308 cartridge. 270s based upon the 30-06, and the 30-06 is based upon the 3003, and the 3003 is supposed to be based upon the 7x57 Mauser. Just name it. Okay? Whatever cartridge you think is an original, at the end of the day, has been influenced by something else. It's essentially a Wildcat. And so a Sammy Spec cartridge is nothing more than a Wildcat cartridge that was adopted into industry standards. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wildcatting and coming up with new ideas. So before you try to poo-poo an idea that, oh, just it's stupid, it's whatever else, that doesn't mean it's stupid. Maybe there's an aspect, a combination that someone has thought of that you didn't think of, or vice versa. Maybe you're thinking of something that they haven't thought of before. It doesn't minimize the efforts that you're putting in. The same thing on my end. I'm not saying I'm coming up with something that's so ridiculously original that no one else has thought of something similar. The difference is I'm not looking to develop this for some simple side hobby. The idea is to create a cartridge that is also going to be useful in the field for your average everyday consumer and also be affordable. So this is kind of a proving grounds that I'm setting for in order to prove what my concept not only works, but is actually should be on the market and be offered to the public. That's what I'm after. It's not just something to some toying thing. And if it was, I wouldn't be trying to present it as anything other than that. I like the idea of developing, but at the same time, I also like the idea of if it's going to be developed, it needs to be with the thought process of can your average everyday consumer afford this and afford to use it, so on and so forth. That's what I'm after. So, is what I'm designing similar to a 270 Winchester? Yes, because the 270 Winchester is the parent casing. Is it similar to a 270 Ackley Improved? Yes. Is it identical? No. Are there a handful of others? Sure. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, I've gone through and I've measured a tremendous amount in order to make sure I'm not identical because I don't want to step on somebody's toes. Do I want to do something on my own? Yeah, but at the same time, like I said, no matter what you think that someone else is coming up with an original, if you look hard enough, someone's already thought about it. Whether or not they did anything with it, that's the difference. So I'm not saying I thought about everything and so on and so forth. But what I am saying is I'm looking to do something with it. So what's the main differences? Well, one thing you're going to find is that the 280, the Ackleys, when they were designed, were engineered mainly based upon the bullets that existed at that time. And so you go back, here it is in the 50s and the 60s when Ackley was doing these things. And the bullets back then weren't all that fantastic. I mean, if you got a bullet to have a BC of 0.4, that was doing really good back then. That really wasn't the design. Most of the Spitzers weren't all that great. Most of them were, a lot of guys were hunting with kind of stubby soft points and round noses and cartridges like that. And so their answer to getting further trajectory was just sheer speed. And that's kind of what the 280 Ackley started off with, is taking the 280 Remington and just throwing more powder at it. Is there anything wrong with that? No. But it's the same thing if you go with like a 30 Ackley, which is basically a 30-06 Ackley improved. 270 Ackley improved, same idea. But because the bullets were the same that they designed around, they kept the lands. And the lands is, so when you look at a case, and let me pull this up and do this here. For anyone who's kind of new to this, hold on. So you have the case of the bullet, right? You have the case, and then you have the bullet itself. The lands is a section where the bullet actually contacts your barrel and your rifling. It's not part of the case. However, when you're making your tooling, your reamers, your go-no-go gauges, and even your reloading dies, you don't get to just simply make a new cartridge or just add a new lands. That tooling has to go together. Now, is there some tooling where you can adjust other aspects, where you can seat it in, like let's say on something that's already existing? Sure. But for the most part, the vast majority of the tooling involves your chamber case design along with the lands. They're set together. So when you're making an adjustment, you have to calculate for all of that together. So it's not as simple as some think it is. It's like, oh, just add this. So whereas, for instance, with mine, again, I'll grab these and I will pull them up, except I don't have to turn the camera around this time, because I'll show them on this side of it. So this is a 150 grain. So the gray tip is a 150 grain Nosler AccuBond long range, and the green tip is a 140 grain Sierra Game Changer, also known as a TGK, Tipped Game King. Both are really good hunting bullets, but according to all the reloading data, because this 150 grain Nosler AccuBond long range has been out for a little while, these both are set at 3.31 case overall length. So for a standard 270 and 30-06, and same thing with the 280 Remington, 280 Ackley, 270 Ackley, anything in that 30-06 type family, including the 25-06, the 25-06 Ackley, so on and so forth. The only thing that changed was the case. The case overall length still remained 3.34 inches. And so when you add in the adjustments, okay, so now you want to have a higher BC bullet in there. Well, here's the thing. If you're trying to add weight to a bullet, you can only do it so far. Like, you can't go wider with it to add the weight. You have to go longer, right? So if I'm already touching the lands here, that means that bullet has to seat down further into the case, which means it protrudes down into your powder reservoir. That's a problem. Because if you look at like a 165 grain AccuBond long range next to a 150, it's longer. If you look at like a 175 grain Sierra TGK next to a 140 TGK, again, considerably longer. And that's not a problem in of itself. It's just when you're doing that, now you don't want to have the bullet interfering with your powder reservoir. So you have to make an adjustment. And so what this is doing, the 27 Ibex, is I'm not doing just a singular change. I'm doing a dual change. Case and lands. Am I going to give you the exact data right now? No, because I kind of like the idea of getting this thing patented. And the idea of getting it to market. And I'm not going to give exact details right now, because I'm trying to also protect my own butt. With that said, am I going to give some basic data as far as, velocities, powder charges, types of powder, things, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But part of the incremental change is also, and again, I mentioned this in another video talking about reputation matters, transparency. So here's part of that transparency. So that's why I'm talking about what I'm doing and my intent. Part of this transparency is also being realistic with how it translates to the field. One of my irritations is when, and it's been this way for decades, you'll go to a box of ammunition or the reloading data, and it's based upon, let's say, a 24-inch barrel or a 26-inch barrel. But for and we'll stick with like 308, 30-06, 270. Okay, those are the common factors. 24-inch barrel, right? Why is it the vast majority of rifles sold in those have 22-inch barrels or 20-inch barrels? It doesn't make sense. Now, if you're only shooting 100 yards, does it really matter? Of course not, because you're not going to see a difference in your trajectory. You just 0 for 100. But it matters when you're out there at 300, 400, and so on and so forth. And so trying to boost numbers artificially to only sell the rifles that are not allowing you to match those numbers, in my opinion, is straight up lying. It really is. So I'm not doing that. This is based on a 22-inch barrel. Okay? That's the length of barrel. And yes, my load data is going to reflect that based upon a 22-inch barrel. And you may ask, well, why would you go with a 22-inch barrel as opposed to a 24 or a 26? It's very simple. Which is easier to carry in backcountry hunting? Which is easier to maneuver in a tree stand? Which is easier to add a muzzle brake or a suppressor to? Yeah, you know the answer, and so do I. It's a lot easier to add a muzzle brake or a suppressor and stay within a reasonable size on a 22-inch barrel as opposed to a 24 or a 26. Why didn't I go down to a 20 if I'm concerned about those things? I have a video about that, about why barrel length matters. Go check it out. But the reality is, 20, you lose too much velocity. You lose too much velocity based upon your factory offerings or even your hand loads. Okay? When you're adding up into consideration, you can't just go, well, it's only 150 feet per second. No, it translates into a lot when it comes to your trajectories and your terminal performance on your game. And at the end of the day, that's more important than your comfort of carry. Putting down that animal ethically is more important than you just wanting to save 2 inches of barrel. Okay? That should be priority number one, is putting down that animal as quickly as possible. It's not just shot placement. That bullet's got to have the horsepower and the right construction when it gets there to do the job. Okay? So I can be an absolutely top-notch marksman and be able to shoot anything I want with a 22 long rifle, but it doesn't mean that it's the best option available. I should match my cartridge to my game. And so ultimately, what I'm seeking to do is to build a high quality and affordable do-it-all type cartridge. A jack of all trades, so to speak. Because here's the thing, there is no such thing as a end-all be-all type cartridge. I'm not going to advertise it as in, this is going to be better than blah, 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 blah. No, because I'm not going to tell somebody that my cartridge is so much better than their grandpa's 30-06, 308, or 270 that they should get rid of that and buy mine. No, what I'm looking to do is say, here's what they developed first. Here's what I'm developing now. Buy them and compare them side by side for yourself and see how they act and see which one you like. Because the fact is, there's none of us here that have hunted or shot or anything without the influence of the 30-06, without the influence of the 270 or the 308 or the 300 Win Mag or 300 Weatherby or the 375 H&H or the 375 Ruger. Okay? If you're a PRC guy, yeah, you better thank Ruger for all of that, because if it wasn't for them developing that case, the PRCs wouldn't exist. Not as you know them. And that's kind of an important detail. So you have to realize that everything we like has influence from something else, even if it may not have identical specs. So you shouldn't be crapping on someone else's choice or what your grandpa had in the past, because you know what? The 270, when it came out, was the bee's knees, was the quintessential new technology of rifles 100 years ago when it came out. It set a new standard. And that, and you really want to get crazy with it. If it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for that change, the 25-06 wouldn't have happened. Okay? And eventually you had the military demanding a shorter action for, it ended up coming out with a 308 Winchester, right? And if the 308 Winchester didn't come out, you wouldn't have gotten a 7mm 08, your 260 Remington, okay, your 243, and now you wouldn't have gotten a 6.5 Creedmoor. Every step that you see now, every cartridge you see now, owes its existence to something else. Everything now, within the last 80 years, is a Wildcat. Just accept it. That's the way it is. Some of those Wildcats make it to market, some of them don't. So don't think that just because I'm doing it, that I'm somehow wrong for it. Okay? Everything. Hornady's been wildcatting. Obviously, Winchester did it themselves with the 6A Western. They wildcatted based upon their 270 WSM. So, everything at this point in time is some form of wildcat, where they took some dead cartridge that hasn't been used in a long time and resurrected it to a degree and necked it down, shortened it, or changed the shoulder, did something, and brought it out. The difference is I'm taking something that's common and commonly used, and it's because it's common and commonly used and still relatively affordable. And I'll just go straight up affordable, because compared to a lot of other cartridges, the 270 is still quite affordable. So I'm taking something that's common, still in production, and modifying it and bringing out features along with it from other types of cartridges, so I can offer something that makes the most sense. Instead of having, at first I started this journey of the idea of having a super versatile, where I have like multiple cartridges and you can just interchange barrels, this, that, and the third. And I'm like, you know what? Let me simplify it for your average person. A lot of people aren't, as cool as that is, may not have the money for that. Whereas something they could have money for is if you have one rifle, but because of the type of case it is and the way the lens design is, you could actually shoot a wider variety of bullets. And so now, if you let's say you are someone that doesn't live in the Western states, okay, maybe it's a dream of yours to go on a pronghorn hunt, or an elk hunt, or a moose hunt, or whatever the case is, but you only have money for one rifle. Some people only have money for one rifle, but maybe you can have that one rifle and have 4 or 5 loads of different weight ranges to be able to take with you when you go do these hunts. And let's say we're gonna just roll with this. Let's say in Colorado you get a mule deer tag. Let's say over in Nevada you draw a desert bighorn sheep tag. Let's say you over in Idaho you draw an elk tag. Let's say over in Nevada you draw a Coues deer tag. And now you're gonna have a couple months where you get to come in and just and hunt a bunch. Well, the best part about it is you only have to pack one rifle, which means traveling is going to be a lot simpler. But now you can have like 4 different boxes of ammunition with you. So that's the whole concept, is you can have a very lightweight bullet for those Coues deer because they only get like 120, 130 pounds. They don't get very big. I think the largest I ever heard on a Coues deer was like 140. They don't get very big. Same thing with pronghorn. They don't get very big. So maybe you only want a small, a small bullet for it. Well, the best part about it is if you have like something like a 120 or 130 grain and it's moving pretty quick, if you have that long shot, it's still going to be flat shooting. Hit that thing out there at distance, put it down. It's not going to do a ton of damage because, again, it's a small bullet, right? And then you go after your mule deer and bighorn sheep, which are considerably tougher than your Coues deer. Now you can go up to a 140 or 150 grain and confidently hit that animal at those ranges and put them down. And then you go up and you go for your last animal, which is your elk. Well, it'd be nice to be able to have the same cartridge that allows you to go up to like 165, 170, 175, and even 180, right? So here's the thing. So add those things into consideration. That's my goal, is to provide a singular type of cartridge that's very versatile and affordable and doesn't recoil like a Magnum. And having data that's on a 22-inch barrel, which means if you suppress the thing, it's still comfortable to carry around. If you put a muzzle brake, it's still comfortable. And so you add that into consideration along with your terminal performances. If you go down from a 24 to a 22, you're only losing maybe 50 to 60 feet per second on average between most cartridges, 75 at the tops. So you're not talking about a tremendous difference. But when you drop down from your 22 to a 20, your drop is even bigger because it's not, your drop in velocities and energy is not linear. It's not singular. It's actually a curve. So because there's a certain amount of burn rate that has to accomplish. And for the size of the volume I'm going with when it comes to this case capacity and what I'm looking to do, I can still get 100% burn rate out of a 22-inch barrel. Will I get another 50 feet per second or so out of a 24-inch barrel? Yeah. But is that enough to really matter? Because I'm already getting my burn rate. I'm already hitting 100%. So the whole point I'm going with is functionality, functionality, and functionality. So I'm trying to build the best all-around do-it-all cartridge that's also affordable and that is easy enough for someone who's even a small frame, like a youth hunter, or a small frame, whether it's a shorter or smaller guy that weighs maybe 120 pounds, or a lady hunter. Whatever the case is, somebody that can actually manage this, because not everybody wants to handle a Magnum. So this is to build it for a do-it-all purpose that's also versatile for everyone to feel comfortable with hunting. So that's my explanation for now. Will you get more information later? Absolutely. But I want you to understand, I believe in absolute transparency, and I'm going to offer that every step of the way with this. Yet, am I perfect? No. But I am going to be honest with it. So please like, subscribe, share, comment. If you have thoughts on it, go ahead and share it in the comments. But I do have a goal with this. It's not just a toy. It's to actually get it to market. I appreciate it, and thank you for tuning in and supporting me. And I please, ask questions. I'm always willing to answer. I'm not so proud that I think that I'm special. I'm not doing this alone either. Without the help of others, I wouldn't be able to accomplish this. So, to those who are supporting me that get to see this, thank you. Genuinely, thank you. It's an amazing process, and trying to get this going has been a challenge, but it's also a fun and worthwhile one, in my opinion. And I really, really, really appreciate all the support. And we'll talk to you later.